They said it was a joke. They said it was harmless. They said it was just a toy. I'm Thomas Buckley. It doesn't matter where I'm from anymore. What matters is where I am. And this place, it's somewhere I never, ever imagined I'd end up. It all started at that square. You know, the one, iconic, swarming with tourists, those royal guards who look like statues. I was there with my buddy, Danny. We were traveling, sightseeing, doing the whole tourist thing. But I've always had this, let's call it a bold streak. Danny calls it being an idiot. He might be right. I saw those guards, standing there like statues, and I got this idea. Stupid, I know, but it felt harmless at the time. I had this toy gun. Looked pretty realistic, I'll admit, and I thought, wouldn't it be hilarious to see if I could make one of them crack? It'll be funny, I thought. I was so wrong. I hopped the barrier. Tourists started gasping, cameras came out. I felt this rush, like I was the star of some crazy movie. I walked up to the guard, raised the toy, and that's when everything went to hell. I remember thinking, even in that split second, this is it. This is going viral. What I didn't realize was that viral was going to mean something very, very different for me. It wasn't just that people were filming. It was a reaction. The screams, the panic. It was like I'd set off a bomb, not waved a piece of plastic. And then the whistles, the cops, coming from everywhere, like something out of a nightmare. I was slammed to the ground, hard. My face hit the cold pavement. My arms were yanked behind my back, and I felt the unforgiving bite of the handcuffs on my wrists. Okay, I get it. No need to break my arm. I groaned. I tried to twist around to see who had pinned me down, but the cops weren't giving me any breathing room. Danny was frozen by the barrier, his face as white as a sheet. He watched in horror as his friend was hauled to his feet and marched away. Around him, the crowd was buzzing with a mixture of shock, fear, and morbid curiosity. Did you see that? They tackled him like he was a terrorist. Is he going to prison? He deserves it. What kind of idiot points a gun at a royal guard? Danny muttered, "Man, you really did it this time." I could already picture the headlines. American tourist sparks international incident at Royal Palace. My head was spinning. I was dazed, but I could still make out the faces around me. Phones were everywhere, recording every humiliating second. Great, just great, I muttered to myself. I'm going to be famous for all the wrong reasons. As the cops hauled me away, I saw Danny, still rooted to the spot. "Danny, help me out. Tell them it's a joke." But Danny just shook his head, a look of pure dread on his face. He knew this wasn't something that could be talked away. This was the kind of trouble that didn't just disappear overnight. The interrogation room's cold. Gray walls seemed to suck the life out of you. It was a room designed to make people crack under pressure. Silent, sterile, and suffocating. A single fluorescent light buzzed overhead, casting a flickering glow. I sat in a metal chair, bolted to the floor. The discomfort only added to my growing sense of dread. Sweat trickled down my neck, chilling me despite the stifling air. My heart was pounding like a drum in my chest. The door opened with a slow and deliberate creak. Detective Inspector Owens walked in. He looked like he'd seen it all and wasn't impressed by any of it. His black beard was neatly trimmed, his eyes sharp and cold, like steel. His badge gleamed under the flickering light. He shut the door behind him with a thud. The sound echoed off the walls. Owens didn't say anything at first. He pulled out the chair across from me and sat down, with a calm authority, as if he had all the time in the world. He placed a thin file folder on the table between us and opened it. He slowly flipped through the contents. Each turn of the page felt like a countdown to something I wasn't ready to face. "Mr. Buckley," Owens finally said, his voice low and steady, "you violated several British laws concerning national security threats. By some stroke of luck, nobody shot you today. Congratulations. That's not a common occurrence." I blinked, momentarily stunned into silence. Did this guy seriously just say national security threats and getting shot? My mind scrambled to catch up, but the words hit like a punch to the gut. This was way beyond anything I'd expected. Wait a minute, I stammered, my voice cracking. A national security threat? I don't think you understand. It was a joke. It was a toy. Couldn't you guys tell it wasn't real? Come on. It was obviously fake. Owens didn't even blink. His expression remained as cold and immovable as the guards outside the palace. He slowly closed the file, folded his hands on top of it, and leaned forward slightly. Toy or not, Owens said, his voice dropping a degree colder. You pointed what appeared to be a weapon at a member of the royal guard in front of the palace during peak tourist hours. Do you understand how that's classified as a threat to life? My mouth went dry. My palms were sweaty. I wiped them on my jeans under the table. I opened my mouth to protest again, but I found myself at a loss for words. The weight of Owens's stare made it feel like the walls were closing in on me. Look, detective, I began after a moment, my voice shaky. I didn't mean any harm. I'm just a tourist, okay? I didn't think it would be taken so seriously. I tried to chuckle, but it came out strained and hollow. Isn't there some way we can clear this up? You know, without all the legal stuff. Owens's eyes narrowed slightly. He didn't move, didn't even blink, but the air in the room seemed to grow colder. Mr. Buckley, this isn't America, he said, enunciating each word carefully. Here, actions have consequences. And for stunts like yours, the consequence is potentially life imprisonment. Life imprisonment, the words echoed in my head like a bomb going off. My stomach dropped, and for a moment, I wasn't sure if I was still breathing. My vision blurred, and I had to grip the edge of the table to steady myself. Life, I whispered, barely able to get the word out. You're joking, right? Do I look like I'm joking? Owens replied, his voice sharp and unforgiving. We take public safety very seriously here, Mr. Buckley. The fact that you didn't trigger a full-scale emergency response is nothing short of a miracle. If I were you, I'd start thinking about how to explain this to the court. I leaned back in my chair, my mind spinning out of control. I couldn't wrap my head around it. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. It was a prank, a stupid, harmless prank. How had it turned into this nightmare? Hours later, I found myself sitting in a cold, dimly lit holding cell. The metallic clang of cell doors echoed down the corridor. I stared at the floor, my mind replaying the events over and over like a broken record. The phrase national security threat kept looping in my head, refusing to let me rest. Outside the police station walls, the story had exploded across the media. Every major news outlet had jumped on it, like sharks sensing blood in the water. Headlines screamed, American tourist sparks security panic at Royal Palace. Toy gun incident raises questions about public safety, international relations, or idiocy. And then there was social media. Social media wasn't just eating this up, it was feasting. The video of me pointing the toy gun at the guard had gone viral in a matter of hours. Hashtag Toy Gunman was trending worldwide, and everyone had an opinion. Some people were outraged on my behalf. Seriously, a toy gun? Overreaction. Free the guy. He didn't hurt anyone. But others weren't so kind. Maybe next time don't play stupid games if you don't want stupid prizes. Americans really think the whole world is their playground. The memes were savage. One had me photoshopped into a medieval painting, holding a foam sword instead of a rifle. Another showed me in prison stripes with a caption, Epic Prank Level 100. I groaned, running a hand through my hair. I tried to block out the mental image of my face plastered all over the internet. I could already hear the conversations waiting for me back home. My parents, my friends, my boss, everyone would have seen it by now. Perfect, just perfect, I muttered under my breath. I slumped against the wall of the cell, wondering how in the world I was going to get out of this mess. Courtrooms, it turns out, are a lot less dramatic than what you see in movies. There were no gasps of shock, no last-minute revelations, just cold, clinical efficiency. The walls were beige, the wooden benches polished but uncomfortable, and the air smelled faintly of old paper and stress. I sat at the defendant's table, my hands nervously fidgeting with the edge of my jacket. I couldn't shake the feeling that all eyes were on me, which, of course, they were. A row of cameras lined the back of the courtroom, reporters scribbling furiously in their notepads. I recognized a few faces from news segments I'd seen earlier. Great, I thought. I'm front-page material now. Across from me sat the prosecution, a prim woman in a perfectly tailored suit, with an expression that screamed, "I'm here to make an example out of you." She didn't need to argue much. The evidence was damning. Surveillance footage showed every detail of the incident. The moment I vaulted over the barrier, the toy rifle in my hands and the guard's icy stare. Add in a few dozen eyewitness accounts, and I didn't stand a chance. The judge, a stern elderly man with thinning gray hair and glasses perched on the end of his nose, cleared his throat. The room fell silent. His presence commanded respect, and even the reporters put down their pens to listen. "Mr. Buckley," the judge began, his voice deep and authoritative. "You stand accused of causing a significant public disturbance and posing a perceived threat to national security. Let me be clear, in today's world, where acts of violence and terrorism have become an ever-present concern, such behavior cannot be tolerated." I felt a lump form in my throat. I wanted to jump up and scream. It wasn't real. It was a joke, but I knew that wouldn't help. Instead, I sat frozen, my mind racing. Whether the weapon was real or not is irrelevant. The judge continued. "What matters is the fear and chaos your actions caused. You frightened families, disrupted public order, and risked provoking a potentially deadly response. It is by sheer fortune that no one was harmed." My lawyer, a middle-aged man who seemed perpetually tired, shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. We both knew there was no arguing with the facts. I felt like the walls were closing in on me as the judge continued his lecture. Each word hit like a hammer. In light of these circumstances, the judge said, his voice firm and unrelenting, "This court has no choice but to sentence you to life imprisonment." Life imprisonment. The words echoed through the courtroom, sending a collective gasp through the crowd. For a moment, everything seemed to slow down. My ears were ringing, as if someone had flipped a switch, muting the world around me. I stared at the judge, unable to process what he had just said. The room erupted into murmurs. Some people shook their heads in disbelief, while others, mainly those seated near the prosecution, nodded in approval. A few even clapped. Their applause, sharp and unsettling in the otherwise somber atmosphere. I barely noticed any of it. I sat in stunned silence, my mind blank except for one thought. This can't be real. They can't actually do this. It was a toy. Just a toy. The walk back to my holding cell felt like a dream. Or, more accurately, a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The guards flanked me on either side, their boots echoing off the tiled floors. I kept my head down, unable to meet the stares of onlookers as I was led out of the courtroom. Reporters shouted questions at me, their voices blending into an unintelligible roar. Cameras flashed, momentarily blinding me. "Mr. Buckley, do you have any comment on the verdict? What do you think of the public's reaction to your case? Do you regret your actions?" Regret, that word gnawed at the edges of my mind. I hadn't thought much about regret when I was pulling off my so-called epic prank. Now, it was all I could think about. Once inside the cell, I sat on the narrow bench and stared up at the ceiling. The walls were the same dull gray as the interrogation room, and the air was heavy with the scent of disinfectant and despair. The sound of a heavy metal door slamming shut echoed down the corridor, reverberating through the cell like a final punctuation mark on my fate. I sat there for what felt like hours, my mind replaying the events over and over. The jump over the barrier, the look on the guard's face, the panic in the crowd, the cold handcuffs biting into my wrists. Every moment etched itself into my memory like a scar. Finally, I whispered to myself, my voice barely audible in the stillness of the cell. Why? It was just a toy, a stupid toy. But there was no answer, no justification that made sense anymore. Just the relentless ticking of time and the quiet hum of the prison around me. Outside, the world moved on. The news cycle churned out updates. Social media buzzed with debates, and hashtag Toy Gunman continued to trend. But for me, time stood still. All that remained were 4 gray walls, the weight of my choices, and the endless question that haunted me. How did it come to this? What would you have done in my place? Do you think the sentence was fair or too harsh? Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you or someone you know ever faced a situation that spiraled out of control because of a misunderstanding? Let's talk about it. Leave a comment, like the post, and share your experiences. This story was created to shed light on serious issues like cultural misunderstandings and the consequences of thoughtless actions. Our goal is to raise awareness and spark conversations that can help make the world a better, more understanding place.